Hey gamers, Maniac here with GamingSense.net. It's Monday. We're going to be doing another podcast, and this week we're going to be talking about a property which I am surprised I haven't brought up until this point. I've played all the games that have been released in the series. More games are coming. In fact, one that's highly anticipated that I'll be talking about later. This is a subject matter that was really close to my heart because it tapped into a lot of interest that I had growing up. Successful people like it. We're going to be talking about inFAMOUS, or as Mega64 would call the series, Magic City Man. Now, I usually start these podcasts off with a little bit of background on myself, and particularly how this series affected me. Now, obviously, since the first inFAMOUS game came out in 2009, that was only so many years ago. It doesn't really go back. It doesn't really harken back to my childhood like a series like Metal Gear Solid would, or something like that, or Mario. It's a newer series. That having been said, it has been quite a successful series. The game was developed by Sucker Punch Studios, published by Sony. Sucker Punch you'd probably know from the Sly Cooper series or the PS2. The two retail games were PS3 exclusives. There was a downloadable expansion, which I believe is standalone. Don't really have a thumbs up, thumbs down on that one. But there was a third game, which was a downloadable expansion, possibly standalone, possibly not, for inFAMOUS 2, which was a PS3 PlayStation Network exclusive. And the newest retail game in the series, inFAMOUS Second Son, will be a PS4 exclusive, which is coming in Q1 2014. And personally, that is the PS4 game that I am most looking forward to. And while I don't plan on picking up a PS4 at launch, unless I happen to get one or something like that through some type of giveaway, I certainly will have one by the time inFAMOUS Second Son comes out. If there was one game that I really am interested in that's going to be exclusive for that platform, it's going to be Second Son. So let's talk a lot about what my background is. Obviously, like I said, it's not really a long-standing series like some of the other ones are. However, it did make a lot of smoke and fire. It just did. When it came onto the scene almost as a sleeper hit. And I'm going to talk about that. For me personally, I always grew up really liking comic book style graphic art. I never read comic books as a kid, but I always liked watching those animated series when I was a kid, of like the Batman animated series and the Superman animated series, and heck, when I grew up, I really liked the Justice League animated series and things like that. I always really liked that more modern digital art style when it came to animation. And I really liked it when it was replicated in a comic page or in art in general. I remember over 10 years ago when I was in California with my father, we passed by an art gallery and I saw this really beautiful piece of artwork that I almost got, or my father almost got. We both liked it a lot. It was like a very cyberpunk-esque, grunge-looking digital artwork piece that was done where it looked like it was like a giant rat or something like that on a flying motorcycle. It was pretty awesome looking. We almost picked it up, but we didn't. I'm actually sorry now that I don't have it, that I never bought it. But maybe it was I don't know. But it was that's like I always liked that kind of style. Obviously nowadays they're using that kind of style a lot in comic books and things like that. But I don't really read comic books nowadays. But I remember back when I did. When I really started reading comic books probably my freshman year of college. There was a comic book shop down the street from where my dorm was. And I usually would pick up like Daredevil or Batman comics and stuff like that. And I really liked the digital art style that they were going for. Particularly during like the Bruce Wayne series, Bruce Wayne Murderer series and Bruce Wayne Fugitive series. I really liked that Batman art style. I just did. And I always liked the idea of like heroes with failings. I always liked the idea of heroes with flaws and realism when it came to your heroes. Nowadays, a lot of people would probably argue that maybe the comic book industry has gone a bit too far with that. That comics are too real and they're not fun anymore. The idea is that comic books maybe should go back to the idea of being fun. And I'm not going to make any comment on that because I'm not a comic book expert. I have to have Twitch in here. And I have to admit, I have asked Twitch to come in here a few times and talk comics. Don't know if he'll ever do that, but if he does, if you want to hear a spiel about comics from a comic book expert who knows the stuff, then you want to hear from Twitch, not from me. And so here came this game pretty much out of left field for me personally, which was a PS3 exclusive that kind of harkened back to the idea behind a realistic superhero in a realistic environment with realistic flaws and failings, realistic goals. And you get to not only be this guy, but you get to be this guy in an open world environment, kind of like GTA where you're a superhero kind of thing. Now, that concept alone, I don't think really grabbed me until I started actually seeing it, like seeing video, trailers, things like that, clips from the reviews and other things. When I got to actually, if you give me a concept, okay, I might be interested in it, but sometimes I'll be skeptical unless I actually see it. And I can specifically imagine that I really didn't get into inFAMOUS until after it had launched. And I know that's kind of weird to say, but by that point, the reviews of it had come out. A demo was available. Sony was hyping it on the PlayStation Home Network. There were trailers. There was basically things that were out and available that you can check out if you were interested in the game. I remember, I think the first exposure I had to it was a Penny Arcade comic strip where a guy was like saying, "Oh, I have all these powers and everything else, but I can't climb a freaking fence. It's my one weakness is the fence." I thought that was kind of funny, and I think that if I remember correctly, I really liked the look of what Penny Arcade did for that particular strip. So props to Gabe the artist for doing that, and props to Tycho for writing it. I thought that was kind of I really liked how that looked. On top of that, there was the PlayStation Home thing going on, where they actually, and by this point, PlayStation Home had not been out for that long. Whenever a new environment opened up in PlayStation Home, it was almost like a little bit of a big thing. And nowadays, like PlayStation Home stuff is constantly and regularly updating. It's hit a major stride. But at the time, PlayStation Home content was, only came out every once in a while, and when it did, it was a big thing. And also, the demo was out. So I decided to give it a look. I wish I could say that when I played the demo of inFAMOUS, I immediately went out and bought the game. And the truth is that did not happen. The truth is that actually the demo for inFAMOUS I didn't like. And I'll tell you why. Kind of like how I feel about the Wonderful 101 demo. The demo didn't do a good job at telling us the stakes before we started to play. It just kind of threw us into an environment. There wasn't really a tutorial for the inFAMOUS demo. You just kind of had there was a buttons layout kind of thing that you could look up in the menu. But other than that, you pretty much were just given the control of Cole during the train level. For those of you who have played the game, it's a level where the main character has to ride a train and power the train down like a, I guess you would say like a train, like an elevated track, and there are people being held hostage inside, and the goal is to get the train to a station so the people inside can get out, basically, and then you can just do whatever you want afterwards. That's the inFAMOUS demo. You get a bunch of powers. In fact, I think you probably get access to some powers that you didn't normally have in that level. But I can just remember thinking, I felt like that was not the right level to start off with. I kind of think that maybe the developers might disagree with me on that. But I wished that they had used a earlier opening. I wish that they maybe even just translated the opening over to that. If they had just done the opening and that was the end of it, that would have worked perfectly. I didn't feel like that was the right level to choose for a demo. It was just kind of like a tedious level, and if you didn't know the stakes, it just was kind of boring. But don't get me wrong, after having played the game, the level works really good as a level in the game, and it's really fun when you know what's at stake and everything that's going on, and you're familiar with the controls by that point. But as a level by itself, I don't think I think there were other levels that they should have chosen in the original Infamous than what they used. So I played the demo, I got through it, and I remember specifically checking out. They did a bit with morality tales and things like that. And you could like pick a good level or a good infamous, something that would make you infamous, or a hero type level that would, that sort of thing. So the demo would give you that option afterwards. So it did show some bit of choice, although I wish that it had put the story more front and center. But I'll get into that when I start talking about the final version of the game. After that, there was a PlayStation Home level, which I checked out. It was an environment. I don't think it's available anymore. I think they might have changed it to something else when Infamous 2 came out, or they might have just removed it entirely. But there was a cool level where they recreated the docks, and they had some of the FMV feeds from the game playing, streaming on the video screens. If you visited the area and if you played the demo, you actually unlocked special clothes. Now, the clothes, if you had unlocked them, are still available. They can still be in your PlayStation Home's avatar's closet. All these years later, when I played PlayStation Home for the first time in like quite a while for this year's past E3 demo that they did, or their big E3 promo, which I'll get into when I start talking about the PS4. I booted up my character, and while my character's appearance was, I had to rebuild the character, all of my clothes and things like that were still intact. All the special items that I unlocked and purchased and stuff, including Cole's infamous outfit, which I really was happy that was still around. And I'm going to talk more about what they're doing, but when we start talking about Second Son and the PS4. So, I think when I finally did get the game was at, I think, a perfect time. I remember not picking up the game at release for a few reasons. Not only did I feel like I'm usually broke during the summers. Not really a lot of work going around during the summers. Most of the work that I usually get are during all the other seasons. During the summers, I usually don't find a lot of work. So I'm usually broke. Can't really play video games. So what happens is that I remember I remember not picking up the game, but I remember that the game actually did get quite decent sales when it came out. In fact, actually, around the same time of these E3 that year, the game, the original Infamous released just a hair before Sony's E3 2009 conference. They actually made a mention during the conference, like one of the opening bits of the conference was a line by one of the guys who was hosting it, that if people weren't watching that conference, it was probably because they were playing Infamous, because the sales of that game was through the roof for them. And I believe the last figures I saw for that game was over 1.2 million in sales, which is, for a video game, quite impressive. Very impressive figures, especially for an entirely new property. Usually, sequels sell better than originals at a faster pace. So for a new IP, it sold quite well. And it was, like I said, it was just it was a cool PS3 exclusive at a time when a PS3 exclusive would have been a good release. I don't think the Uncharted 2 wasn't going to be out until later that year. Resistance 2 had come out a couple of months earlier. It was kind of like it was a good time to release a PS3 exclusive. So Infamous comes out, and it sells like crazy. People really like it. In fact, actually, I remember that Mega64 did a video on it, and where they did a parody of the game, and they kind of, how do we put this? Remember how I mentioned earlier about how people were kind of saying, oh, it's a realistic superhero in a realistic urban environment? Yeah, they hammed it up to 11 on that one, and they released a video which is called Magic City Man. Where they took a guy and they put him in. They took one of their guys and they put him in pink goggles and they added lightning bolts from his hands and made it look like he was like climbing things. And he's urban, really urban, and he's magic in a city. And I think what they were trying to make it look like was that inFAMOUS was generic or something like that, or the idea behind inFAMOUS was generic. Or maybe they were just parodying that factor. I usually really like Mega 64 stuff, and don't get me wrong, that Magic City Man video was hilarious, but I didn't think of inFAMOUS as generic or anything like that. I thought it was kind of interesting. I think that it was something that really had it. There was not a lot going to. I mean, I know there was the series Prototype, which was also released at around the same time. That was a multi-platform thing, but I can't really remember a lot of people talking about Prototype. I remember a lot of critics were talking about it because it was added around the same time, but I can't remember it getting the same praise from critics or from gamers that inFAMOUS did. Maybe that has to do with the fact inFAMOUS was PS3 exclusive. Maybe PlayStation loyalists were really excited about it. But I don't know. I never picked up Prototype. I never really picked up any of the sequels or anything like that. I just wasn't really interested. It just seemed like I played it. inFAMOUS was just something that was quite interesting to me, at least. But maybe that's why they were inspired to do that series. I don't know. You'll have to ask them. But I thought it was a hilarious video. As usual, Mega 64. So, I pick up the game at around a good. When I finally do pick up the game, it's I believe around Christmas time. What finally happened was that two great things actually happened. Sony lowered the price of the game from $60 retail to $40 retail, and they released on the PlayStation Network for anybody to download a exclusive power that was originally only available to people who pre-ordered the game originally. Now anybody could download it for free and play it on, play inFAMOUS basically. And I thought that was really cool. So I thought, okay, now the time is right for me to pick it up. At launch, it didn't seem like there was a huge, there was like a huge impulse for me to get it. Once they lowered the price and made the special power available, then I became really interested and excited to play the game, and that's exactly what I did. I started playing it, and now I really want to talk about the game itself, if I can. I really don't want to get too far into spoilers, although maybe I should. It might be tough for me to talk about spoilers, but the game's opening is probably one of my favorite openings of all time. I remember starting to play the game, and when you play the first opening bit where Cole gets his powers, the way the game starts, there's no menu screen at start. There's basically just a scene. You're seeing a city, Empire City. And it says push start to play, and you got a little inFAMOUS push start to play. When you hit start, what looks to be an atomic explosion just goes off. Wow! What a way to start! You push start, the button goes off, the city blows up. Okay, not expecting that. Usually I get like a new game or an options menu or difficulty setting, that sort of thing. I don't usually get push start, city blows up. Yeah. After that happens, then the game starts and it kind of does this bit of an easy tutorial type thing where you pretty much are in the middle of the blast radius. Something horrible has happened. Downtown has been, and you have to basically make it out. All the while realizing that things are not normal for you anymore. You're absorbing electricity. You're throwing out electricity. These things are not things that normal people can do. And your character, Cole, the main character, is acting appropriately to how somebody would act if all of a sudden they were in the middle of this and all of a sudden they had powers. They'd, be horrified, unable to process it. They'd be in shock. Okay, a little pun there, but that was not intentional. That, I think, should have been the beginning of the game. I'm sorry, beginning of the demo. I really wish that if they wanted to make the demo better than what it was, they should have just had the opening and have it end after, like, I don't know, the first or second, probably the first level or something like that. And immediately I was drawn in for a few reasons. One, again, loved the art style. Two, loved the subject matter. Huge fan of comic books like this, of anti-hero possibilities, or heroes that have to be working for the greater good, that sort of thing. So immediately, all of my comic book enjoyments are checked off. Art style, subject matter, everything, check that right off. I'm down. I'm interested now. As the game progresses, you start making choices. Do you want to be a hero? Do you want to be a villain? Obviously, that was the whole idea behind the Infamous series, although that's kind of surprising because, well, let's face it, each particular game does have a canonical ending and a non-canonical ending. At least I feel they do. I'll get into that later. But you have a BFF. I really also like the secondary characters, and you really don't see the villains that much. I appreciated that. All along of the time of the game set up a lot of stuff. One, it set up the main character, the secondary character of Zeke, who I really liked. Zeke was kind of like a cross between your best buddy, your true blue friend, but he's a person just like anybody else. He has fallacies. He can make mistakes. He can be seduced by ideas of power and stuff like that. I liked him. And then there was, I believe her name was Trish, Cole's potential love interest. And the relationship that the two of them have. After he gets powers and how he starts acting with those powers and how the media portrays him and things like that once he has those powers. And then, like I said, there's the villains. I really liked all of it, and I really don't want to get into spoilers, although I'm afraid I'm going to have to. It also set up how the government was interacting with this type of thing. And not only were they establishing that there was this villain that was responsible for Cole getting these powers in the first place, perhaps setting this whole thing up, that Cole would get powers for some reason, but that there was going to be something even worse, was that the villain did this because there was an even bigger baddie that was on the way that the villain knew about. Like, he was doing this because he felt he had to in order for Cole to eventually fulfill his destiny and defeat this bad creature who is referred to as simply the Beast, which is what I'm going to refer to the Beast as, the Beast. And that the bad guy of the first Infamous game believed that it was Cole's destiny to defeat the Beast because where the bad guy had failed. Over the course of the game, you find these little hidden transmissions from it's claimed that this person is the husband of somebody that works in the government, who's like an undercover individual, really smart person, does everything to cover their tracks. And over the course of how the game progresses, kind of start thinking, okay, this guy is important, sure, but is he really this operative's husband? Who does he really work for? That sort of thing. I'm not going to go into any of that because there's possible spoilers. So if you want me to talk about that sort of thing, you'll have to wait. I'm sorry, but I really don't want to talk or resolve any of this for you guys. I just kind of want to realize that everything was set up. Like the first game not only was great, but it does set up. Cole has powers. He has the ability to throw lightning. He has the ability to create ionic storms. He has the ability to control weather in some cases. He has the ability to launch things and he has weaknesses. He has to operate in an area that has a working power grid. a live power grid. He can't go into an area with no power grid, or if there was a power grid, if the power grid to be disabled, he has to. That's one of his weaknesses. He can't go in water. He can't get inside a car. He can't hold a firearm, or else he'll explode. His body's chemistry will ignite the gunpowder inside the bullets, basically, and cause the firearm to explode in his hand. It's the same reason he can't get inside a car. His physiology destroys the engine, that sort of thing. So. He also does have the ability to climb buildings, static float, that sort of stuff. I really liked, just kicking around. If I can't say anything further about the story, because I really don't want to for spoilers, but I want to talk about the gameplay a bit. The controls were great. I really liked some of my favorite parts of just screwing. It was just screwing around in the city. Climbing buildings on a whim, looking for collectibles, jumping up, getting into random battles with enemies, with enemy gangs and things like that, powering myself up, increasing my statistic, all this stuff, exploration, and, the controls were great. Everything about the gameplay I thought really worked. I liked everything about it. So for me, when it hits the end and we get a cliffhanger, which is the bad guy, the bad guy is defeated. I won't say who the bad guy is, but the bad guy is revealed. The bad guy is defeated. But there's still an air that there could be something else. There could be this beast. What is this beast story? We don't know. We can speculate, but we don't know. And that's how inFAMOUS ends. Kind of an auspicious way to end it. After I finished playing the game, I started doing a lot more research on anything that was available for the game series and things like that. And I remembered actually catching this video series that was done by, for those of you who are fans of Two Player Productions, Two Player Productions is a video game documentary series producer that is really, really good at their jobs. I have seen video game production documentaries and things like that for the most part, and most of the time they're usually fluff pieces. They don't really show too much. They're not really that interesting. Two Player Productions was one of the few companies that I remember. Film Oasis is another one, but I haven't seen anything from them in over probably almost 10 years. But Two Player Productions is probably one of the best that I've seen recently to make documentaries. And they did actually one of the first things, I didn't even know it was who they were at the time. I mean, now they're familiar, people would know that they're doing the Double Fine Adventure documentary series. I think they are also doing the Scrolls documentary series. They did half of a documentary series. They never released the other half for Uncharted 3's development. They never released the second part. I think that was for legal reasons. I don't know exactly why. But the first thing, and I didn't even know who they were at the time, but my first exposure to them was with this inFAMOUS documentary series that they did, which detailed kind of what went up to about the week before the games was finished. And they did like a 3-part documentary series about the game's release. Or about leading up to the game's release, where they were talking about, okay, yes, Sucker Punch is going to this new, we're moving away from Sly Cooper, we're doing something else, and all of that interested me. It was a really well-made 3-part series. The only place I've seen it was on GameTrailers.com, although I do think that there is a Sucker Punch community channel on YouTube that also has it. That has it up there. I don't know if that's a legitimate feed or not. If that's legitimately Sucker Punch, I don't know. But that's if you're a fan of the first inFAMOUS game and you really want to know what went into making it and the kind of people that made it, then seek out that Two Player Productions documentary series. I think there was like at least 3 parts. There might have been a 4th part. I don't remember. But that's a really good series, and I saw that after playing the game and enjoyed it quite a bit. So obviously after inFAMOUS, like I said, with all of this stuff happening, obviously people were really looking forward to the possibility of a sequel. The PS3 wasn't going anywhere, and I think it was around 2010 or so. I can't remember exactly what particular time. I think it might have either been, I don't think it was E3. I think it was around, it might have been E3 2010. Might have been sooner than that. Might have been, I can't remember exactly, but they released a trailer for what eventually would become Infamous 2. And it kind of accompanied a bit between a demo, of like a playable demo, with a trailer, where you play as Cole in an entirely new environment. He's got entirely new abilities and powers, and he's almost like he's moved from an analog city to New York to an analog city to New Orleans. I think immediately people were interested. Obviously, I was. And they basically said, yes, we're looking after the Beast. Yes, this game will be about he's investigating the Beast. This is all going to be about how Cole handles dealing with the Beast. Okay, that was exciting. The one complaint I remember, and this I think was a pretty valid complaint, I remember agreeing with this, that they gave Cole black hair for all the initial demos. They changed Cole's appearance. And a lot of gamers cried foul after that. They really did. Because I don't know if you've ever met my sister's now husband. Yes, my sister is married. And the guy she's married to looks identical to the main character from Infamous. So much so that whenever I'd make an Infamous joke or do an Infamous, or in some cases PS3, or even for my PS4, when I made my PS4 announcement video for the discussion for PS4, after the PS4 was announced, I actually got him to be in it to play Cole. He helped me out in the Infamous 2 unboxing. Basically, he looks exactly like Cole. And they changed Cole's appearance for the opening bits, and I was kind of upset about that. But they did eventually, I guess, I don't know if it was either because of pressure from the gamers, pressure from Sony, or just cooler heads and them coming to their senses. But Cole would be returned back to his original image before the game was released. So it didn't really affect anything. The earliest previews that I saw for it, I believe I remember Michio Kaku doing a Science of Games talk about this for GameTrailers.tv. I can't remember if it was for the website or for this TV show on Spike, but it might have been both. And they asked Michio Kaku, who is probably one of the smartest men on the planet, what the possibility would be of a realistic hero operating with complete control of electricity like that. And he said highly unlikely, because electricity in itself, even if you had power over electricity, you wouldn't be able to control electricity. Electricity is far too random and unwieldy when it's removed from something like a wire. When it arcs, it goes wherever it wants. Lightning, for example, can't really be controlled. That sort of thing. So, you can't really, unless you're absolutely controlling it from point to point, you can't just direct electricity outwards or things like that. It's going to want to go to the ground. Which kind of put a little bit of the burst in my bubble about that whole realistic superhero thing. But, there is a such thing as suspension of disbelief. And most people, in fact, David Cage is famous for saying this, will suspend disbelief one time. They'll allow you the one suspension of disbelief. In this case, I'll allow the suspension of disbelief that he can control electricity. Anything else, if you try going beyond that, I'll start thinking that that's a little weird. And I know David Cage basically said, we did the suspension of disbelief in the very beginning of the game, and then we introduced a new villain that everybody just did not believe. So we learned from our lesson, and we didn't ask for, when we did we did Heavy Rain, we didn't do a suspension of disbelief at all. At least I don't think they did in Heavy Rain. For Infamous and Infamous 2, obviously the idea is that people have powers, or that the possibility exists that people could get powers. It could be inside their genetic codes. That's my suspension of disbelief right there, and it checks out. And I think what really helps, it makes it easier for me to suspend my disbelief, is just how realistically I always felt that people acted. A lot of the reasons why, I know a lot of people go back to and quote Watchmen as one of the best superhero stories ever written, and in some cases one of the best novels ever written, period. Because a lot of people basically said, oh, they did it because they depicted characters in a dark way and everybody likes that. Not so true. It depicted characters acting realistically in a realistic environment. I cannot tell you how much I hate horror movies for the most part, and I can't watch them. Not because they scare me, but because they're not scary, because in most cases, characters don't act realistically at all. If a horror movie is made, and there are some of them, but there are very, very few, where characters act realistically in them, I can suspend my disbelief and enjoy the movie. One that I can think of, off the top of my head, of course, the gold standard that I always thought of was Halloween. I always thought Halloween, the original Halloween, I should say, by Carpenter, starring Jamie Lee Curtis. My mother loves that movie. I guess she grew up. She always watches it every Halloween. And so I've seen it a few times, and I always thought of that as a character's acting realistically. It still did a little bit of suspension of disbelief, obviously, but I enjoyed that because of, let's face it, I enjoyed it because of Loomis. But I'm getting a bit around myself. That's my point that I'm trying to make. If you can make the characters believable, it makes, if what they're doing is unbelievable, all the more believable, basically. And I think that's what Infamous did. Now, there was a comic series, I was told, I did some research on this, there was an Infamous comic series. I never read it. I did put it up on my Amazon wish list on my website in case anybody wanted to gift it to me or send it to me so I could do a review of it. But nobody's ever sent me anything off that Amazon wish list, so, and I'm not saying I expect anything. But I did promise that if anything was obtained off that, I would review it, and nobody sent me anything, so I've never had a chance to read it. I never had the pleasure of reading it. I was told it does bridge the gap between what Cole does between his travels between Empire City and New Marais, but I've not read it, so I don't know. The cover art and some of the artwork that they used looked interesting, but were just sample panels that I saw, so I don't really know exactly how exactly it looks, that sort of thing. There was a beta test. I can't remember exactly how I got in on the beta test. I don't know if they did like a random sign-ups or, how do I put this? The beta test may have launched before PlayStation Plus or just around the same time that PlayStation Plus was coming out, or around the same time of that. So I remember that I was getting in on a lot of early access betas for the PlayStation 3 around 2009 or so, as well as early access demos for the PlayStation 3, for two reasons. One, I was a legacy member of the Sony Gamer Advisory Panel, which was set up around the time of the PS2, and I got access to a lot of pre-release demos because of that. The other thing was, I also had a subscription to the first year of the Sony Core digital magazine, or Digizine. And with a yearly Core subscription, you could get some things like free PS1 games, random, early beta access and early demo access. I remember getting the Dead Space 2 demo early because of that. I remembered getting access to free digital downloads for Siphon Filter and Spyro the Dragon. That sort of thing. And I ended up getting into, either through sign up or something else, beta test for Infamous 2's beta. And the reason why they were doing beta tests, there was no multiplayer, but there was a multiplayer component in the form of the UGC system. Now, for the UGC system, they were bringing in a whole new idea where players would be able to create their own levels or create their own missions in-game, upload them to the web, and players could play them automatically. That was like going to be their crowning achievement for Infamous 2. Not only would you be able to play storyline missions and things like that, but you'd also be able to play custom missions and create custom missions with a custom editor. For no multiplayer, it was kind of an interesting concept. You also, if you were a beta tester, got access to at least half of the main city, the main islands for New Marais, the starting island, as well as so you could just kind of screw around in the city if you really just wanted to. The problem was that the beta launched shortly before, if my memory serves, the beta launched shortly before the PlayStation Network hack. And so the beta started for like, I don't know, a couple of hours at most. And then PlayStation Network completely went down. And it didn't go back up for a month. So yeah. Not a good time to launch a beta. Regardless, when the network went back up, the beta went back up. And players could download it again and play it. But it launched it around that time. I was part of that beta test. I think I was one of the first people in the world. I remember I shot a video of me just kind of screwing around in the city. It was one of the first glimpses that people could see of New Marais. And I uploaded that. That got a lot of traffic. I must have gotten over 2,000 hits really quickly on that. It was one of my it was very quickly trafficked. I think it was because I also found that little Easter egg that they had where one of the electronics stores on the coast of New Marais was called Red Ring Electronics. Guaranteed repairs in 12 weeks, and then a little underscore, repairs not guaranteed. Kind of a rip on the Xbox 360, you think? Just my opinion. Red Ring Electronics, repairs not guaranteed, 12 weeks. Yeah, as someone who's had 2 Red Rings, yeah, totally. So there was the beta test. It was fun. Now, as we were leading up to release of Infamous 2, there were a few things. One, the game was going to be released at around the same time of, E3 that year. This was E3 2011. Infamous 2 was going to be launching at around the same time. In fact, it was probably going to be launching during E3. I was attending E3 2011, which meant that even though I had placed an order for the game and it was paid in full, I couldn't actually go pick it up. I had no idea that the time the game was going to be out was going to be the exact same time as the release of Infamous 2. And I had pre-ordered the really, really nice Hero Edition of the game. It included a replica of Cole's backpack, all of the pre-order DLC. There was a couple of different pre-order DLCs from a couple of the different manufacturers. Retailers. Everyone got a couple different ones. And it included all of the DLC that was offered for pre-order, which is why I actually did a giveaway, because I didn't need an extra code for the lightning hook power. So I ended up giving that away on my website a couple of years ago, because I had 2 of those codes. There was no reason to have 2. And what else happened was, what else happened? And it had a cool statue of Cole. Right? I really liked it. I thought it was a decent one. It was $100, which was expensive, but not unreasonably expensive. I kind of think that nowadays the new collector's editions, or the things that call themselves collector's editions, are pretty unreasonably expensive. In particular, and don't merit the price, like the GameStop exclusive Last of Us release, $160. It did not merit that price. It just didn't. Especially since it didn't come with the art book that the freaking $80 edition came with. You're paying upwards of about $80 for a statue. It did not merit that price. But I thought for $100 with the figure and everything, the little collectible and everything else, I thought it worked really well. The problem was I couldn't get it because I was going to be at E3 that year. So what I did instead was I talked to the clerks over at the GameStop, and I said, look, somebody else is going to have to pick this thing up on my behalf. I'm going to be at E3 this year. I can't pick it up. And they said, well, who do you want to pick up? If you want to have somebody pick it up on your behalf, if they have your card and they have your receipt, they can pick it up on your behalf if you tell us. And I said, well, my mother could probably pick it up. I could probably make her do it. She knows this area. Which is a usual turnaround for me. My folks are really good at making me do things that don't need to be done. Or at the very least, asking me to do things that I've, one, never done before, two, don't have any concept or knowledge of doing, and three, don't have any benefit to anything. And because of that, I usually have to like dig any information that I possibly can. You know, basically I have to dig essential information. Okay, you want me to complete this task. You've given me no information on how to do it. I've never done it before. How do I complete? You know, I have to wring information out of them, just essential information. Like, give me an address. Okay, where is that? I have no idea where that is. And a lot of the times the information that they give me is always wrong. Like, they'll give me an address and it won't be that, or it'll be called something else, or the information will be all this is what always happens. So when my parents ask me to do something, usually for them or for somebody else for them, I'm usually completely unable to do it because they don't give me good enough information to complete the task, or the essential information that you need in order for the task to be completed. Here, I basically made it as easy as pie for my mother. I said, here's a card, here's her cash register's receipt. Give them both of those things. They will. I told them where it is. It's right next to such and such. I told her exactly where to go. I told her everything right. I told her they'll be expecting you. They might card you for your ID just so that they can verify that you're who I said you were. That's all. Just give them my card and my receipts, and they'll give you this, and they'll give you a poster. And that should be it. Make sure I have the receipt, and that's it. You know, just make sure that everything is there. The posters, the box, the receipt. Make sure everything is there in a bag, and I will get it when I come back from California. And sure enough, I come back from E3. Sadly, Infamous 2 did not have a showing at E3 that year. There were a bunch of different playable demos on the show floor for various different games under development, but Infamous 2 was not one of them. They did, however, have a launch trailer, and while the launch trailer was not technically an E3 trailer per se, they did cycle it through the trailers that were shown through the Sony booth. So while some people wouldn't consider it an E3 trailer, there was, they did have a trailer for it, although the game was out. It was not being previewed. They had a final version. I don't know why they chose not to do that, because I've certainly seen games that were recently finished at E3. I remember when Grand Theft Auto Vice City was released on PC just when they had finished it. It hadn't come out yet, but the PC version for Vice City was playable at E3 back in 2004. So that kind of thing happened. So props to my mom. I come back from California. I got the game. I got the download codes. I got the poster. I got my sister's then boyfriend, now husband, who I mentioned before looks exactly like Cole, to shoot the unboxing with me. Great guy. He agreed to do it. He has never played Infamous before. He's not familiar with Infamous. But I showed him the pictures. I showed my sister the pictures, and they both said this. Yeah, he really does look like that. So we did the unboxing, and it's pretty funny. I thought it was pretty funny. The problem was it was so far after E3 that I didn't really get as much notoriety on it that I wanted. I kind of figured if I could get somebody that looks exactly like Cole to do the videos, to be like Cole, I kind of thought I'd get a bit more comments on it, and I really didn't. I think the reason why was because I was delayed by about a week, because I spent the week prior at E3 and I to get the game unboxing done. But still, it worked out pretty well. I still think it was a pretty good video. So by this point, Infamous 2 does get released. I downloaded the DLC with the Hero Edition. Loved the Sly Cooper backpack. That's really cool. That was a really cool backpack. Um, what else? So it was a cool. That was definitely justified for the $100 price tag, and I started playing the game. Now the cool thing about Infamous 2 was that it actually allowed you to import your save characters over from Infamous 1. So if you had played a good guy or a bad guy in Infamous 1, or both, you could carry a save over to your next game. So, and that would grant you some extra XP or some extra things. You could get some extra stuff out of it, basically. And I was really happy about that. As for what to do with it, that basically puts you in a good spot for, how do I put this? It puts you in a good spot to start the game off. Once again, Infamous 2 had a great beginning. It starts off in Empire City just as Cole is about to leave for New Marais. And just as he's about to leave, the Beast reveals himself. Now, a lot of the game has to do with the Beast origins, who the Beast is, and unfortunately, again, because of spoilers, I really don't want to talk about the Beast, just like I didn't want to talk too much about the ending for the first Infamous game. Regardless, I really liked what they did to kind of bring up. They kind of basically took all the stuff that I liked about Infamous 1 and they kind of improved upon it for Infamous 2. Once again, the controls were really good. They kept in the collectibles, but they greatly improved collectible searching. There's still one single what's the word I'm looking for? There's still a single blast shard in Infamous 1, which to this day I have not been able to find. I have combed over all 3 of Infamous 1's islands. I have climbed every single building I can think of, and I don't even see a bloop on the radar for it. I have been told there are 2 possible spots it could have been. I know for a fact that one of them I searched, so it wasn't in that spot. The other one I also searched from top to bottom and didn't find anything. I don't know. It could be a bug. It could be I'm just not looking hard enough through the middle of the city or something like. I don't know. But to this day, that's just something I've not been able to find. On the other hand, because thanks to an extra special power in Infamous 2, I was able to find all of the blast shards, and I was grateful about that. I was really happy about the expanded powers. New Marais is obviously an analog to New Orleans. I don't know how the people of New Orleans feel about that. I know that they depicted it a post-Katrina type New Orleans, basically. Again, I don't know how people feel about that. There's one area they call Flood Town in the game, which is obviously completely flooded. The city's attacked by a giant beast, you know. There's a lot going on there, basically. I don't know how they feel about it. Honestly, I mean, you really shouldn't, you know. I couldn't imagine somebody actually having a problem with it. It was depicted as factually, and it wasn't really considered that. So like they depicted New Orleans like I've been to New Orleans. Granted, I've been to New Orleans before the flooding and the hurricane, but I really enjoyed the recreation of the architecture and things like that. I thought it was a cool difference. I thought it made for an interesting difference than Empire City. I thought Empire City was good, but I kind of liked that. Okay, this is a new game. They're going to do something a different type of environment. I thought it worked. I liked the physics of it when you started unleashing your powers and how things reacted properly to it. I really like that. Once again, it was like with the first Infamous game, I just love screwing around in the game just screwing around in the game's environment. Sure enough, I loved screwing around in the game's environment. I'm glad that I got to have that opportunity. Now, again, I can't remember exactly which ending for the first Infamous game is considered canonical. If you ask me, I think either one could probably be canonical, but don't quote me on that. As for the second game, however, there is only one ending that is considered canonical. And unfortunately, it's not really... Neither ending in the game of Infamous 2 was an upper ending or a good ending. They both had, you did right in one case, but there was a tragedy, or you did bad in the other case, and horrible things could happen because you did bad or to the world. Which ending is canonical? We don't know. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit afterwards. And also, I kind of liked that there were other superpowered conduits. You met, over the course of the game, you meet other people, 2 women, that also have conduit abilities. One with the ability to control ice and another one with the ability to control fire. And both of them have their own strengths and weaknesses. And actually, over the course of the game, you make a choice whose powers you actually want. And it's cool. It's definitely cool. It definitely gave a lot more... It almost had RPG level custom, for that type of thing, where you could choose your powers based upon how you want your alignment. I really like that about the game. So when, either for Infamous or Infamous 2, you'll be able to choose, your actions have more than just how the world perceives you, and what your final rating will be for your ending. It also affects what kind of powers you have. And in Infamous 2, because you can use your alignment or other things to choose which extra powers you want to use, I really like that. I thought that was really cool. I don't want to get too really specific again for spoiler territories as to who the character conduits are. Because that would be spoiling something, because a character conduit is not a character conduit. They're later revealed to be a character conduit. I really don't want to say who they are. Needless to say, they do make for interesting characters, and just like with Infamous 1, it's nice that there's like a background. There's nice that there's a good... And Zeke is back. And of course, I really liked Zeke. And I know that there were some people that didn't like Zeke from the first game. I really hope that the people that didn't like Zeke from the first game can see Zeke in the second game and really appreciate him as a character. One of my favorite scenes in the game, this is not spoiling anything because this is not a plot scene, is a scene, I think it's either just before or just after a mission or something like that, where Zeke is on his rooftop watching television, and Cole just kind of stops on by. And neither one of them says anything to the other. They're just sitting on a couch watching TV, and drinking beer. And then they start drinking beer. And at some point, one of the phones beep, and the other one nudges to the other one. Don't answer it. It was like the ultimate male bonding scene. And I can tell you this right now, I wanted to shoot it in live action with my sister's husband. And I still might. Because it was, seriously, I'm watching that scene, and for a scene where literally nobody says anything to the other, it was just so human. I don't know whose idea the scene was. I don't know if it was the director's idea. I don't know if it was a writer's idea. I don't know if it was just decided that they would do it during a mocap session or something. But whoever you are, you're a genius. That is, without a doubt, one of my favorite scenes in video games ever. In fact, I remember that shortly after Infamous 2 came out, when Sucker Punch made the announcement that they were going to be bought by Sony and that they were going to become first-party Sony developer, I included that clip from Infamous with the announcement. Because it's just to show, Sucker Punch and Sony are now best buddies now. Never got anybody commenting on that one. But that was a great moment. The gameplay was great. The missions were fun. I never really played too much of the UGC editor levels. In fact, actually, when I was going over my trophies in the game last night when I was preparing for this podcast, I noticed I had all the I had all the trophies in Infamous 2 except for the UGC related ones. I was like so mad at myself. But that's what that's what happens. Shortly after Infamous 2's release, the DLC that was released for pre-orders gets re-released for pay, although people who already had it wouldn't have to pay any extra for it, bundled along with other new DLC content. And Sucker Punch actually bundled, I think it was like 3 different sets or maybe 4 different sets. You could piecemeal them out individually, but for like skin, there was like a skin set, and there was a weapons, like an amp weapons a set, and then there was a superpower set. All of it was released to DLC, both pre-order stuff and new content. And unfortunately, after the PlayStation Network hack, I never registered a credit card on the PlayStation Network again because I didn't trust the PlayStation Network. And I still, to this day, have not changed that policy. I will never put a credit card on the PlayStation Network again. If I do buy content, it's through prepaid cards. And that's just really unfortunate. But so I never picked up that content. However, what I did instead was around that same time, shortly afterwards, Sucker Punch released, and again, you guys can quote me on this, whether it's an expansion or a full-price standalone game or something like, or a stand. But regardless, it was a digital download game that would have taken place during the events of Infamous 2. It was a DLC expansion for Infamous 2 called Infamous 2 Festival of Blood. I believe Sony was charging $20 for it. Through the PlayStation Network. It was PS3 exclusive, and it was downloadable. And what this was a side story told by Zeke to a woman in a bar that he's trying to pick up about a night that Cole got bit by a vampire and had to fight to stop a vampire takeover of New Marais. I remember that a lot of people thought it was very interesting. I mean, for me, I was excited for any new Infamous content at all. And there had not really been any announcement of Infamous 3. So I kind of thought a side story was kind of interesting. But regardless, what happened was still, it was released through the PlayStation Network, and I wasn't going to get a download. I wasn't going to register my credit card to download it because I didn't trust the PlayStation Network. So what I did instead was, around the same time, maybe a couple of months ago, Sony started releasing, in anticipation for Christmas, bundled copies of a lot of their most popular franchises on the PS3. So games like, what was it called? The God of War series, for example, got bundled together and released as a single packed set. They did the same thing for Infamous. Infamous got bundled together, and they basically pegged it as like the Infamous Saga, 3 games for the price of 1: Infamous, Infamous 2, and Infamous Festival of Blood. However, they also said that that the downloadable content will also be available. Now, if memory serves, God of War probably launched at about a price of, I think, $40, but dropped down to $20. I think you can probably find a copy of the God of War Saga for probably around $20 to $30 right now. And noteworthy, for people really interested in God of War Saga, I just want to make you aware that it only includes discs for God of War 1, God of War 2, and God of War 3. The God of War PSP games that were ported to the PS3, while they are available in PS3 version, are download only. They didn't include a Blu-ray disc. So for those of you hoping that all of the God of War games on disc were going to be released with the God of War saga. They weren't. You'll have to have PlayStation Network access to download the Origins collection or buy the Origins collection on disc separately. For inFAMOUS, however, inFAMOUS basically released both inFAMOUS and inFAMOUS 2 on two separate Blu-ray discs. No manual. That kind of stunk. I don't like that they're doing away with manuals. I know a lot of people complain when I make mentions of manuals or not manuals on the when I do my unboxings. That's because manual, as far as I'm concerned, should be part of a full price retail game. And if you don't include one, you look cheap as a publisher. And it just happens that many games for the past couple of years have not been coming with manuals anymore, almost like this is a new norm. And I usually will make a comment, oh, there is a manual, and I'll praise the publisher for doing that. There's no manual included with inFAMOUS, with the inFAMOUS saga. What they did instead was they included them digitally on disc. However, there was one thing I did notice. There was a download code included for inFAMOUS 2 and for inFAMOUS 2 DLC content and inFAMOUS Festival of Blood content. The thing was, and I just want to make people aware of this, the download code, and I noticed this as well for God of War Saga, had an expiration date of March of this year. Now, I picked up God of War. I picked up what do you call it? I picked up the inFAMOUS. I actually picked up the inFAMOUS saga on disc last night, and that's partially what inspired me to do this podcast. And I already have a copy of inFAMOUS 1. I already have a copy of inFAMOUS 2. I only bought the inFAMOUS collection because I wanted a physical download code for Festival of Blood and all the inFAMOUS 2 DLC content and themes and whatever. When I opened it up and saw that I had an expired download code, I was furious. I was absolutely freaking furious. And I tried it anyway. And sure enough, the code worked. So for those people who may be aware, I think what might have happened is that Sony might have realized that those discs are still at retail. And they're still being sold at $30, $40 or something like that. And people are buying them. So they must have extended the expiration dates on those codes because my inFAMOUS code did work. And I was able to download all of the extra DLC, and including some of the DLC I already had. But I had all the extra DLC plus the Festival of Blood. And for the first time ever, last night, I was finally able to, from beginning to end, play through Festival of Blood. I really liked Festival of Blood a lot. I thought it made for a cool side story. I liked what they did with the trophies. I really liked what they did with some of the trophies, although some of them were kind of tedious. You had to stake 100 enemies. You had to find 20. The way the game set up was it logically progressed you in a way because Cole was a vampire in the game. It logically made you do things to upgrade yourself, like stake enemies. But if you kept doing them past what would have given you, and it had a progress bar that really helped. Because it made you do that by yourself, basically, or you wouldn't need XP or something like that. On top of that, there was no morality. There was no multiple endings. It was just one ending. But I thought it worked. I really did. I enjoyed it a lot. It kind of streamlined the whole inFAMOUS process. There were still collectibles. There was still stuff to seek out, which was fun. Smaller area. You only had one of the big islands, but you had the whole island to discover. You couldn't check out Flood Town. But the story of Festival of Blood is that, like I said, Zeke is trying to court a woman in a bar, being his charming Zeke self. and she's making fun of him for reading a comic book. And he tells her, no, actually, my friend is Cole McGrath. And because my friend is Cole McGrath, I actually got to read this stuff. This is practically research for me, which is kind of a charming way to go about it. And it'd be like, maybe if someday I could tell my girlfriend or something if I'm reading a comic book. No, this is research. I watch a lot of gaming reviews and things like that. I watch a lot of stuff edited. And it may all make sense to me to do that kind of stuff, but when people see what I'm doing, they always ask me, like, they always think I'm doing nothing, or they also always think I'm just goofing off or something, and I tell them it's research, and they don't believe me. So I kind of feel what you're saying, Zeke, because I do this. This is what I do. I have a website. I review this stuff. I cover gaming news, stuff like that. So I gotta keep up on what's going on. And sure enough, what happened was that she didn't believe him until he said his friend was Cole McGrath, and he told a story about Cole investigating a catacomb being during a pyre night, almost like a Halloween celebration or something like that, and very Halloween themed. I got to give it that. I think it was released at around Halloween of 2011. So it was a very Halloween themed game, but I kind of like that they kind of gave it a whole new. They gave the environment it was still New Moray, but they gave New Moray a whole new type of scene. They gave it a new paint job with like effigies burning and balloons and all kinds of cool stuff. It almost felt like Mardi Gras or something like that, cranked up to 11, like Mardi Gras plus Halloween. So the whole area looked different. So Cole investigates the catacombs. And he's kidnapped by vampires, unwillingly resurrects the vampire leader named Bloody Mary, and becomes a vampire, and he has one night to kill her. Now, again, I don't want to spoil anything, and obviously you're probably thinking to yourself, well, this can't possibly be canonical, because if it's canonical, it would have to fit someplace in the Infamous 2, and there's nowhere to fit it into Infamous 2, which is true. So it's probably considered a non-canonical side story. But it was still a lot of fun. So they mixed up vampire spells with Cole spells. You could do tasks and stuff like that to level yourself up. There was no need of XP anymore. All you had to do was complete a task to unlock enhancements. Like if you, if you staked hidden vampires, you could unlock a better rocket launcher. That sort of thing. I thought it worked. I really did. It was a lot of fun. One thing I didn't like about it, however, was the game forced you to play through at least 2 UGCs. Now I don't have a problem with the UGC system like what they had in Infamous 2. But I was going around but usually from what it was like in Infamous 2, the UGC missions were entirely optional. You did not need to play them. And what happened was, here I am playing through Festival of Blood and seeing nothing on the map except a UGC. I'm thinking I basically spent an hour at least screwing around in the environment trying to find my next mission, and I couldn't. Regardless, it was a lot of fun. I'm glad I got the saga. I'm really happy the download codes weren't expired. No regrets picking up the saga. I already have the 2 discs. I already had Infamous 1 and Infamous 2. I got it just for the DLC. It was on sale on Target for $20. I got to give it credit for that. So I don't want to really give off too much about what happens. Needless to say, bit of a twist ending. Kind of fun. Still a lot of fun to play, though. And I was glad to finally get a new chapter of Infamous to play. But that's probably not what you want me to talk about when we're talking about next chapter of Infamous. I think you want me to talk about the next full retail Infamous game, which is not going to be a PS3 game at all. It's going to be a PS4 game. When the PlayStation 4 was first announced, my God, I sound like Morpheus right now. When the PlayStation 4 was first announced, Sucker Punch had stood in front of a crowd of Sony devotees And one of their their presenter told a whole story about government control and government overstepping their bounds based upon a story that had happened to him personally. And he wowed everybody with that bit. He didn't say what he was going to show. We knew he was from Sucker Punch, and he told that story. And then the trailer aired. At the PlayStation 4 announcement, we saw a pre-rendered cinematic trailer for inFAMOUS Second Son. Now, obviously, given the ending, or one of the endings, probably the canonical ending, of inFAMOUS 2, Cole McGrath could not appear in another game. It's also the same reason why inFAMOUS 2's Festival of Blood could not be canonical unless it took place during inFAMOUS 2 storyline and could not have happened after it. That having been said, there was, it basically told a story about a new character who gets superpowers in modern day Seattle. And he basically starts a revolution, basically, against a government that had become oppressive against superpowered individuals. Like after events of what happened with New Marais and Empire City and stuff like that, the government realized perhaps that superpowered individuals were reality and they had to stop superpowered individuals at all cost. So a new main character is going to be in inFAMOUS Second Son. And I actually read the previews for Second Son. I am stoked. For those of you guys who had ever seen the show Heroes, you might be familiar with that. The concept of that show is kind of almost like inFAMOUS, basically. All of a sudden, spontaneously, and in some cases, not spontaneously, a bunch of people start getting superpowers or start discovering that they have superpowers. However, they still have to live normal lives, and they don't want to go around flying. They're not all powerful. One guy can fly. He can still get shot when he's flying up there or something like that. He's not immortal. There are other people that are invulnerable but can't fly. They can't run fast, that sort of thing. Everybody has their own individual power. Except for Milo Ventimiglia's character in the show, and I hope, Milo, I'm hoping that I pronounced your last name correctly. Peter Petrelli, who actually discovers halfway through the first season, originally he believed he could only have superpowers when he was near other superpowered individuals. In the second half of the first season, he discovers he actually can, if he comes in contact with another superpowered individual, retain their superpowers forever, permanently. Practically becoming the most powerful super being of all time, basically. And he didn't believe he was superpowered. He only believed that he could, absorb the superpowers of others. And sure enough, what happened was, that is what we're going to have for inFAMOUS Second Son. The new main character of this game is a conduit, but he's a conduit that can basically take the powers of under conduits, or that he comes in contact with, and retain those powers. The first power that he gets in the game, and will have in the game, is smoke. The power to control smoke, which is a power that we've seen him use in many of the E3 demos and things like that. So it's something that we have seen him control. From the looks of it, in the most recent demo that I've seen, it looks like he may have the power to control electricity, but that was and possibly other powers may be coming. But from the most recent trailer, I think he'll also have electricity, obtain electrical power at some point. A cool little thing that Sony was doing during the E3 event was they did actually have an E3 a virtual analog of the E3 Sony press booth during in PlayStation Home, and they allowed players that were screwing around at home to basically unlock all kinds of different shirts and wallpapers and jackets and avatar items and things like that, just from doing all the missions and things like that. And one of the unlockable things, you kind of had to do all the tasks in order, unfortunately, which took longer. But once you got to the infamous Second Son task, you actually could unlock a jacket of the main character in Infamous Second Son's jacket for PlayStation Home. Unfortunately, the E3 booth for 2013 is no longer active, and I don't think you'll be able to get that anymore. But I thought it was a nice little giveaway that they had done, and you got to see some screenshots and stuff like that. The new game will take place in Seattle, and unlike Empire City and New Marais, Sucker Punch is calling this Seattle. They're not changing the name. They're not changing the landmarks. They felt that since their business is in Seattle, as are a lot of other major video game developers, I like to think, honestly, Microsoft probably had something to do with that, to be perfectly honest. Microsoft is known for buying up a lot of companies and bringing them to Seattle to be closer to Microsoft HQ. But yeah, basically, they are recreating Seattle, so you'll be able to be super powered in Seattle. The PS4's processor will allow incredible physics simulations. You think that what you could do just destroying some wrought iron railings in New Marais in Infamous 2 is something? The simulation possibilities that I've seen just from the E3 demos for what this new guy can do, like you're talking, like, have you ever imagined House of Cards, or a House of Cards, basically, you know, unleashing something and everything just toppling realistically like a House of Cards? Yeah, you'll be that powerful in the game. And on top of that, Sony has recently announced, and this is confirmed, that even though they do not have a solid release date yet for Infamous Second Son, there will be a pre-order incentive. They're offering 5 pre-order patches. They're cosmetic only. One of them is being done by Penny Arcade. I don't remember who's doing some of the other ones, but a lot of the other graphic artists are doing it. Possibly I Am 8-Bit. I can't remember. And you'll be able to choose a patch for your back for choosing to pre-order Infamous Second Son. That is awesome. You know, that's cool. So already we've got a pre-order incentive. No talk yet of a collector's edition. I really hope they don't do a collector's edition. It's not really... Right now, collector's editions are so expensive. I mean, people have to buy new consoles this November. To release huge collector's editions at around the same time is not practical, at least not to people's wallets. So, I mean, I don't mind pre-ordering a $60 retail game right now, but I hope, I really don't want to have to spend $120, $160 on a new collector's edition. I will. If they choose one, they will, but my wallet is going to hate me for it. Okay. So that's Infamous, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I actually really hope you enjoyed it. It's a great franchise with a lot of potential and a lot of future coming for it. I want to thank you guys for listening, and just be aware, the PS4 is going to be coming November 15th. I believe November 15th. It's going to be coming mid-November. You will need that in order to play Infamous Second Son. Infamous Second Son is coming Q1 2014. It will not be a launch title. So until next time, guys, this is Maniac with GameAccess.net. Take care of yourselves. Over and out.